Close your eyes for a moment. Can you hear it? The faint thunder of hooves, the rhythmic clip-clop of a carriage on cobblestones. This sound, the sound of the horse, is practically the heartbeat of human history for the last 5 millennia. It is a sound we take for granted, assuming speed and distance are conquerable facts of life. But what if that sound never existed? What if the horse remained nothing more than a wild, untamable beast grazing on the Eurasian steppes? This is not just an interesting thought experiment. It is a deep dive into how profoundly slow, geographically isolated, and strategically limited our civilization would be today. The moment the horse was domesticated, sometime around 4000 BCE in Central Asia, the trajectory of humanity changed forever. We had harnessed kinetic energy that was not ours. We achieved speed and scale that fundamentally altered warfare, agriculture, and communication. If we remove the horse from the historical stage, we are not just removing an animal, we are removing the greatest single accelerator of early human progress. Civilization would immediately hit a massive, multi-generational roadblock. Our universal speed limit would become the walking pace of a human, or, at best, the slow, reliable, but utterly plodding pace of the ox. Think about the implications of that speed limit. Let's begin where the absence of the horse registers most violently: the battlefield. Goodbye to the swift cavalry charge. Forget the Scythians, the Huns, and the Parthians. More critically, forget the Mongol Empire. The Mongols built the largest contiguous land empire in history, not through superior technology, but through superior horsemanship. Their entire logistical and military genius relied on small, tough ponies that could travel dozens of miles a day and forage for themselves. Without the horse, Genghis Khan is just a capable general walking across Siberia. The military might that conquered China and stretched into Eastern Europe collapses entirely. This instantly redraws the map of Eurasia. Western Europe is never directly threatened by steppe nomads, but they also never benefit from the cultural exchange and trade that often followed these violent clashes. The entire concept of mobility in war is shattered. Wars become purely about siegecraft, heavy defensive positions, and slow, grinding infantry conflicts. Armies become utterly dependent on rivers and coasts for efficient transport. Imagine Roman legions, but traveling 10 times slower and requiring exponentially more human labor to haul supplies. The development of the chariot and later the mounted knight would be impossible. Warfare would rely almost entirely on heavy infantry formations, perhaps developing advanced forms of pike squares or siege engines much earlier. Victory is determined by endurance and supply lines, not shock and speed. The very nature of military strategy would be defined by the limitations of human or bovine power. Now let us leave the battlefield and consider the breadbasket, the agricultural revolution. The ox is reliable, it is strong, but it is agonizingly slow. The ox also requires a neck yoke, which works for its anatomy, but limits its efficiency and speed. The horse, once proper harnessing like the horse collar was developed, was far superior for plowing and hauling. The horse can work longer hours and move much faster, allowing farmers to cultivate significantly more land. Without the horse, the transition from subsistence farming to large-scale, marketable agriculture is dramatically delayed. The medieval three-field system, which dramatically boosted productivity in Europe, would stall. Famine becomes more frequent and more geographically widespread because surplus food cannot be transported efficiently beyond a very small radius, say a 40-mile radius from the farm. This lack of agricultural efficiency has profound knock-on effects. Cities struggle to grow because food cannot be guaranteed. The population growth seen during the medieval warm period and the Renaissance would be severely restricted by supply chain choke points. Why bother specializing as a craftsman or scholar if the majority of the population must remain tethered to the land to survive the pace of technological diffusion itself agonizingly slow? Ideas like the printing press, metallurgy techniques, or mathematical advancements that sprung up in one region would take decades, sometimes centuries, to cross continents. Imagine the speed of the intellectual exchange during the Renaissance without messengers or post-riders to quickly deliver important philosophical works. The world becomes culturally fractured. Empires that rely on central communication and rapid deployment of governors or edicts simply cannot function effectively over large distances. A Chinese emperor or Roman Caesar might only truly control the territory reachable within a month of travel, leaving large peripheral regions in perpetual autonomy. Finally, we arrive at the age of global exploration and conquest, the era that truly defines the modern world. The horse was a fundamental weapon of colonization. When the Spanish conquistadors landed in the Americas, the horse was a terror weapon, a psychological shock that shattered indigenous armies who had never encountered such a powerful, controlled beast. Hernan Cortes and Francisco Pizarro famously used their few dozen horses to great effect, transforming small raiding parties into terrifying forces. Without horses, the technological gap between Europe and the Americas shrinks considerably, at least in the early stages of conquest. European conquest is certainly delayed, perhaps by centuries, relying instead on cumbersome sea travel, limited river transport, and vulnerable infantry exploration. Furthermore, consider North America. The rapid expansion across the Great Plains and the development of the Wild West culture were entirely dependent on horses. The powerful equestrian cultures of the indigenous peoples, which developed after the arrival of the Spanish horses, would never have existed, fundamentally altering the history of the continent. But equally, the speed of westward expansion by American settlers would have been glacial, dominated by the covered wagon pulled by oxen. The United States would likely remain a thin strip of states clinging to the East Coast well into the late 19th or even 20th century. The vastness of the world remains vast. Communication across global empires like the British or the Spanish would rely solely on ships, making internal land governance a logistical nightmare. The Pony Express never happens. The Trans-Siberian Railway might become a desperate necessity far earlier, simply because no efficient land travel exists. In this alternative reality, the pace of life is radically different. We live in a quieter world, dominated by the creaking of wooden wheels pulled by slow oxen. The world shrinks to a 40-mile radius. Your known world is defined by what you can walk to and return from in a few days. We lose the romanticism of the cowboy, the knight, the charioteer, and the nomadic archer. We gain centuries of slow, arduous travel and local, fragmented communities. The shift to industrialization might still occur eventually, driven by steam and coal, but the foundation, the rapid trade, concentrated populations, and large-scale agricultural efficiency provided by the horse would be missing. The horse was not just transportation, it was a massive injection of kinetic energy into the slow metabolism of early civilization. It was the crucial engine that allowed us to conquer distance, unify empires, feed growing populations, and wage war rapidly. It accelerated our progress by millennia. By simply asking the question, what if horses never came to the stable, we reveal just how precarious our technological ascent truly was, and how much we owe to that powerful, four-legged partner.